Hey guys, tonight we drop you straight into the cold, stone belly of a medieval fortress, with the sound of distant war drums echoing through the valley, and a rising sense of dread you can feel in your gut. The year, irrelevant, the air, damp and moldy. You're not royalty, not a knight, not even a squire. You're just, here, trapped. Welcome to your new life under siege. You've barely figured out which corner of the keep smells less like goat droppings when the first whispers start. Someone saw smoke on the horizon. Enemy flags. Movement in the tree line. Before you can even figure out how to light a torch properly, the guards are barking orders and slamming the heavy outer gates shut. Too late to leave. Too early to panic. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know your location and what time it is where you're watching from. I love seeing where in the world we all fall asleep together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in a stone keep built to withstand war, but barely. The walls are thick. Yes, but you already hear anxious shouting above. Archers are positioning themselves, some even dragging up bundles of hay to soften the blow of incoming projectiles. This isn't a drill. The outer village has been abandoned, crops left half-harvested, goats still bleeding as the last peasants scramble inside. You watch a shepherd get turned away at the gate, too late. He bangs on the wood, but no one opens. One look at the soldiers' faces tells you what they're not saying. If the gate opens again, it may never close. The castle stinks of anxiety. It's in the air, thick with unwashed bodies and livestock already being herded into inner yards for safekeeping. You spot a barrel of dried peas toppling as a frightened boy runs past, and someone starts yelling about wasting food. You want to ask someone, anyone, what exactly is going on, but all you get are cold stares and rushed mutterings. This siege wasn't supposed to happen. Word was, the enemy was miles off, licking wounds from another failed conquest, but someone got bold, or greedy, maybe both. Historians still argue whether this kind of sudden siege was strategic brilliance or chaotic opportunism. You don't care. All you know is, you're stuck now, and there's no clear plan for how long the food, or your nerves, will last. The lord of the castle makes an appearance on the upper walkway, a dramatic one. Naturally, he's in a heavy fur cloak, glaring out toward the enemy as if scowling alone might scare them off. His voice echoes down the courtyard, something about honor, bravery, and holding fast. You try to catch the actual strategy in between the theatrical flourishes, but there isn't much. Just hold the walls. Hold the walls. You're not a soldier. You've maybe carried a sword once, and that was to impress someone you liked. They weren't impressed. Now you're being told to report to a post. What kind of post? No one tells you. Just a post. You wander through tight hallways and steep stone staircases, finally ending up near a tiny slit window in a turret. There's hay on the floor and a weird smell you can't place, sort of like smoked fish and despair. Outside, the world is quiet in that heavy, anticipatory way, like the breath before a storm. You glimpse the enemy, rows of them, spears, shields, banners flapping lazily in the breeze. They're not in a hurry. Why would they be? They know how this works. Siege warfare is a waiting game, and you're already losing the first round, because you just realized you left your only blanket downstairs. A fellow defender leans beside you and says, deadpan, you got your pea jug yet? You blink, pea jug, unless you like running past arrow fire to find a corner. He shrugs. You quickly understand that medieval sieges were less about heroic battle and more about bodily logistics. There's no plumbing here. No bathrooms. Just jugs. Many, many jugs. And the longer the siege drags, the more unpleasant they become. You make a mental note to always keep yours capped. Night falls. You're given a piece of dried meat that may or may not be horse. It's chewy enough to file your teeth down. You chew anyway. It's better than nothing. The castle has entered siege mode now, gates shut, fires low, conversations in whispers. A runner comes past with a warning. Scouts say the enemy has siege towers, and trebuchets, big ones. You hear the first mechanical groan of wood and rope being tested in the enemy camp. That sound, it travels, deep, creaking, ominous, like a massive skeleton stretching after a long nap. And then, There's the drums. Low, steady, ta-dum, ta-dum. They come from far off, but they settle right behind your eyes. A scholar once wrote that medieval siege warfare was 30% combat and 70% psychological torment. That sounds about right. The castle isn't being attacked yet, technically, but already, it feels like you're crumbling inside, and you still don't know where your post is. Somewhere, a baby cries. Someone else yells for silence. You lie on your side on the stone floor and try to sleep with your helmet still on, because you're not sure when the rocks will start flying. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, or maybe, like that shepherd at the gate, you won't even hear it coming. You wake up to shouting, not sword clashing, not fiery explosions, just shouting, panicked, annoyed shouting. You bolt upright, your neck stiff from sleeping on stone, and realize someone's yelling about the grain stores. Turns out, nobody double-checked the grain barrels before sealing the castle. Mold, lots of it, not to mention the rats, who are already living their best lives deep in the sacks of oats you were kind of hoping to survive on for the next, 6 weeks, maybe more. You make your way down to the storage cellars, and the smell hits you before the doorway does, musty, sour, and slightly like disappointment. A steward is already taking inventory, sweating more than the situation deserves, muttering something about, should have pickled more turnips. You glance at the shelves, some salted meat, a barrel of dried peas, a crate of withered onions, and 6 large wheels of cheese stacked in the corner like forgotten treasure. There's a rumor that one of the monks stashed away some honey-roasted almonds in the chapel crypt. No one can confirm this. Of course, you're tempted to sneak down and check, but chapel crypts during a siege, that's horror story territory. The castle's well becomes the next object of obsession. You and a few others line up to test the crank and bucket system, and there's a visible sigh of relief when the water comes up cold, clear, and without any suspicious floaters. A functioning internal well is basically your lifeline now. If it had been outside the walls, you might as well have started licking moss for hydration. Historians still argue whether most medieval castles had reliable, self-contained water systems. Some did. Others relied on rainwater collection and prayers. You're suddenly very, very interested in clouds. As you carry a jug of water back to your spot, someone tells you about the salt room. Apparently, one of the lower storage chambers is lined with huge slabs of salt. Not for food, though that helps, but for preservation. You find it a few hours later, dimly lit by a single wall torch. A few smoked hams hang from hooks, surrounded by thick crusts of salt. Like meaty fossils, you stare at them a little too long. Food becomes obsession. Conversations drift to, remember that goose stew from the fair? And, I'd pay a month's wages for an apple. Someone tries to barter a candle for a boiled egg. You don't even ask where the egg came from. You just watch. But not all the food is technically meant for humans. Horses, chickens, pigs, all crammed into pens in the lower yard, have their own supply. The stable boys start getting twitchy, wondering how long before meat becomes meat. One says, don't name them. You try not to look too long at a particularly fluffy chicken preening itself like royalty. You also learn about siege bread. It's not the good kind. It's a mix of barley, oats, whatever flour's left, sometimes tree bark, and a pinch of salt if you're lucky. Baked rock hard to last. People say if you throw it hard enough, it can dent armor. You chew it slowly, trying not to lose a molar. Meanwhile, the nobles dine differently. Word is, the Lord's Hall still has fresh fruits, probably apples wrapped in cloth to stay firm, and a keg of imported wine. You catch a glimpse of a servant carrying a tray up a stairwell and feel your stomach growl in protest. Then comes the real disaster. The lower pantry floods. Someone knocked over a barrel trying to fight off a rat the size of a small dog, your words, not theirs. And now the runoff water from last night's storm is seeping through cracks in the masonry. Barrels float. The cheese stack tips. You join a rescue line with buckets, bailing like your life depends on it, because honestly, it kind of does. And now, there's talk of rationing. You're given a small pouch with 3 hard biscuits, a wedge of cheese that smells like betrayal, and a note, daily issue, preserve as needed. You consider eating 2 immediately. You don't. In a quieter moment, a grizzled older man tells you that during a siege 30 years ago, they ate leather boots, boiled them soft, tastes like broth. If you close your eyes, he says it like a joke, but doesn't laugh. As the second night falls, you feel your stomach tighten, not just from hunger, but from the gnawing knowledge that this is just the beginning. You lie beside your dwindling biscuit pouch and try not to count how many are left. The castle goes darker now, candles are being hoarded, torches are rare, moonlight becomes your flashlight. You sit near the cold hearth in a storage hall, listening to the soft drip of water from somewhere in the ceiling. Then someone laughs, softly, bitterly. You ask why. I saw the cook carving a rat, said he was testing recipes. You don't laugh. You're beginning to understand that castles weren't exactly designed with your comfort in mind. Sure, from a distance they look romantic, majestic towers, thick stone walls, maybe even a nice fluttering banner if someone remembered to raise it. But once you're living inside one, oh, the cracks show, literally. You wake up shivering. Again, it's not even winter, but the stone walls suck the warmth from your body like a vampire in a cold mood. You try to wrap yourself tighter in your cloak, but the dampness makes everything feel heavier. Your breath fogs in the air. Somewhere nearby, someone's coughing with what sounds like the beginnings of something medieval and unpleasant. The floor beneath your straw mat is uneven, and the straw smells faintly of mildew and sheep. You get up to stretch and immediately knock your head against a support beam, your third time this week. You mutter something unkind about castle architects. The truth hits fast. Medieval castles were built to withstand, not accommodate. The thick walls trap cold air in the winter and sweat-slick heat in the summer. Windows are narrow arrow slits, great for defending, terrible for ventilation. You haven't had fresh air in days, and it shows. Your eyes itch, your clothes reek, your hair, well, let's not talk about your hair. You take a walk around the inner keep, hoping to find a sunbeam or at least a warmer corner. No luck. The hallways are dark and narrow, lit by sputtering torches clinging to what little oxygen they can get. The ceilings drip from condensation, and every corridor echoes like a cathedral full of ghosts. You catch your reflection in a warped bit of polished iron. You look like a damp squirrel in armor. Then there are the sounds, constant creaks, groans, footsteps you can't always identify. Castles are noisy, even when they're trying to be quiet. The wind slips through cracks in the masonry like a ghost with a grudge. You swear it whispered your name last night. You come across a group trying to patch a leak in the ceiling using a mix of mud and horsehair. One guy's idea. Another calls it peasant glue. It smells like wet fur and failure. You offer to help, and your reward is getting splashed in the face with dripping ceiling water. Tastes slightly like iron, probably not a great sign. Even the Great Hall, the castle's pride and centerpiece, feels less like a royal court and more like a gymnasium turned into a shelter. The long wooden tables are sticky. The once proud tapestries are faded and smell like stale ale. You pass a few guards sleeping under benches. One of them snores like a dying ox. You consider kicking him gently, just for revenge. One upside, you find the old chapel. It's quieter there, less chaotic. Candles flicker gently beside dusty wooden pews. And for a moment, the world feels paused. A monk is muttering something in Latin over a copy of the Psalter. He looks peaceful. You sit quietly in the back. Not for religion, really, but for the quiet, and the warmth. Someone left a blanket draped over a pew. You stare at it like it's a bar of gold. You learn from a fellow unfortunate that many castles had multi-use spaces. Bedrooms could double as armories. Kitchens often served as clinics. Your resting spot could be someone's latrine tomorrow. He laughs. You don't. Historians still argue whether castles were ever truly livable in peacetime. Some say they were cold, damp nightmares with prestige. Others insist they were signs of wealth, offering comparative luxury. You're currently trying to stop your sock from freezing to the floor. In a forgotten side hall, you stumble upon what looks like an old storeroom filled with broken furniture, discarded tools, and, miracle of miracles, a mostly intact wooden bench. You sit. It creaks alarmingly but doesn't collapse. You decide this will be your new quiet spot. Your kingdom. Your one slice of non-horrible. You doze there for a few minutes before a rat scurries over your foot and ruins everything. Back near the stables, a group is trying to build makeshift insulation by stuffing dried moss into the cracks between stones. Someone jokes that it's the medieval version of weather stripping. You offer to help, mostly for something to do. It sort of works. You don't freeze that night, just shiver a bit less violently. There's also the problem of smells. So many smells. Wet fur, dung, sweat, smoke, pickled onions, unwashed feet, damp wool, spoiled wine. You can't even tell where you end and the castle begins. At one point you swear you catch a whiff of lavender, but it turns out to be a crushed soap someone dropped a week ago. It's now part of the floor. You start avoiding the eastern corridor entirely. Someone knocked over a chamber pot in it, settled. No one has cleaned it. Everyone just steps around it. The stink is now part of the architecture. A soldier tells you, not proudly, that he hasn't changed his tunic in 9 days. He says it like he's winning. You back away slowly. The one moment of domestic joy comes when someone manages to get a fire going in the small smithy. People gather just for the heat, not even talking. You huddle close and feel your fingers thaw. Someone roasts a chunk of beetroot on the coals. It's the best thing you've smelled in a week. That night, you return to your stone nook, clutching your blanket like treasure. The wind howls outside the wall slits. The stone beneath you is no softer, no cleaner, but somehow, it feels familiar now, like a very old, very cranky roommate. You fall asleep to the sound of dripping water, creaking beams, and a single guard humming off-key from a watchtower above. For a moment, you forget the siege, you just exist. And you don't even notice the bat hanging from the rafter above your head. You're jolted awake by a thump so heavy it vibrates in your ribs. Then another, and another. Boom, boom, boom. It's not thunder, though it carries the same ominous rhythm. You scramble to your feet and run toward the nearest slit in the wall. Outside, the world is moving. Not just the soldiers, not just the enemy, but the very air, trembling with the tension of what's about to begin. The siege engines have arrived. You catch your first real glimpse of them, towering wooden trebuchets. They're throwing arms cocked back like the claws of some ancient wooden beast. They're being wheeled forward, surrounded by dozens of soldiers, all calm and purposeful in the way of people who know exactly what they're doing, and exactly how long they can take to do it. You hear someone gasp behind you as a massive stone, easily the size of a dinner table, is slung into the air. It arcs high, so high you lose it for a second in the gray sky, and then crashes into the outer curtain wall. The castle shudders. Debris rains down, screams rise up. You're no longer a passive observer. The war has begun. Your immediate impulse is to duck and cover, but there's nowhere to go. You're in a stone box with nowhere soft or safe. Instead, you do the next best thing. You run, awkwardly, like someone who doesn't remember how knees work, toward the tower stairs. Up is where the action is, for better or worse. The top of the battlements is chaos. Men scramble for position, shouting to each other over the wind and the rising wail of horns from the enemy camp. Flaming arrows are starting to fly, small, orange streaks in the sky that somehow feel both beautiful and deadly. One lodges in a bale of hay, which instantly erupts into flame. You instinctively look around for water before realizing, there's none up here, just rocks, lots of rocks. You grab one, because everyone else is, and join the line of defenders hurling them over the side at the enemy siege tower that's inching closer. It's slow, deliberate, and hideously armored in wet hides and soaked wood. You aim, you throw, you miss, you try again. One of the guards hands you a pot of something thick and foul-smelling. It's hot, too hot. You realize it's pitch. You're told to pour it when the enemy's close enough. You nod, even though you're fairly sure you're going to drop it on yourself by mistake. Someone hands you a lit torch, and you feel very nervous about holding both at the same time. Flaming oil wasn't always used in medieval warfare, you recall. Historians still argue whether it was common or more of a romantic myth, over-dramatized by chroniclers with a flair for the cinematic. But something's burning up here, and you don't want to be holding it when it sloshes. Then comes the sound you dread, the creak and snap of a ladder slamming against the wall. The first wave is here. You peer over the edge and see them, soldiers in mismatched armor, faces painted, climbing fast and hard. You freeze. You are not trained for this, but the man next to you jabs his spear downward and grunts. Don't think, just push. You do. You jab with the wooden end of your weapon, catch someone square in the chest, and watch them fall with a scream that vanishes into the roar below. You feel horrible, then guilty. then strangely resolved. This is survival now, you don't have time to feel anything too deeply. Arrows whistle overhead, some too close. One strikes the stone near your elbow and bounces off with a metallic ping. You drop to your knees instinctively, heart hammering. Someone next to you screams, they've taken one in the leg. Others rush to drag him down the stairs, trailing blood that steams against the cold stone. You catch yourself laughing, not because it's funny, but because the absurdity of this moment has fully short-circuited your brain. You're holding a burning stick, standing on a medieval wall, with your clothes half covered in rat dust and cheese sweat. Life is strange. Suddenly, the trebuchets pause. The noise doesn't stop entirely, but shifts. The enemy is regrouping. The flaming arrows fade. For a brief, terrifying moment, there's silence. Then, crack. A section of the outer wall collapses in a thunderous burst of stone and smoke. You're too far up to see clearly, but the reaction from the crowd below is instant. Screams, orders, chaos. Somewhere, a bell starts to ring, the kind of bell that never rings unless things are very bad. This is what they wanted, not just to batter your walls, but to rattle your mind, wear you down. Psychological siege warfare was always about breaking spirit as much as structure. You feel it creeping into your bones already. You stagger back from the edge. Your arms are sore. Your face is streaked with soot. Someone hands you a skin of wine and you drink, gratefully, deeply, until your teeth are purple and your tongue numb. The sun begins to set in streaks of red and gold over a horizon choked with smoke. You watch shadows grow long across the valley. The enemy settles down again, tents glowing with torchlight. They're not gone, just waiting. And so are you. As you crawl back to your corner of the keep, sore and trembling, you notice that everyone is a little quieter tonight, not from fear, but from the realization that this is far from over. You lie down. You don't even bother brushing off the ash. You just wrap yourself tighter and close your eyes to the faint glow of the fire outside. Then you hear it again. Boom. By the third or fourth day, though honestly, who's even keeping count anymore, something changes inside you. You're no longer flinching at every thud. You're not surprised by the cold or the constant hunger. You've stopped gagging at the smell of unwashed everything. You're adjusting. Congratulations. You now live in a castle under siege. The best part, everyone else is adjusting too, which is great, until you realize what that actually means. Everyone's now just a little bit more irritable, a little more unpredictable, and way more prone to snapping. Siege life is basically lockdown, but without Netflix, showers, or windows. You're sharing one overcrowded structure with soldiers, servants, nobles, and livestock. Space is limited, tempers are shorter than a boiled leek, and the bathrooms? Still just jugs. You wake up to the sound of someone vomiting in a bucket. Again, you no longer even ask why. Maybe it's nerves, maybe spoiled food, maybe the cheese finally turned on us. Someone else is shouting about a stolen blanket. Two men nearly come to blows over a piece of dried apple. Another has started talking to a wooden spoon. You begin mentally tracking who's most likely to snap first. You wander toward the central hall, which now looks like a medieval waiting room. People are slumped against walls, fanning themselves with scraps of parchment, playing dice on the floor, or just staring into space like prisoners of their own minds. A little girl is drawing a picture on the floor with a piece of charcoal. It's a crude castle surrounded by fire. Optimistic. In one corner, a young couple is arguing about whether the dog should be allowed to sleep in the bed. You pass a pair of knights comparing blisters on their feet like war medals. You decide not to look too closely at yours. It's amazing how fast the hierarchy of needs collapses. First, everyone cared about defending the castle. Now, everyone just wants a clean corner, a warm bowl, and some privacy. Privacy is the real treasure here. You start fantasizing about it the way people once fantasized about gold. You find a mostly forgotten alcove near the north stairwell that nobody seems to be using, just big enough for you to sit and think. It becomes your sanctuary. You give it a nickname, the not-so-throne room. You even light a candle there. Luxury. But just as you start to feel a tiny sense of control, you hear a cough. A bad one. Wet, deep, persistent. You look around. Others hear it too. A subtle shift happens. People inch away from the sound. Not obviously, just, slightly, carefully. In tight, unsanitary conditions, sickness spreads like wildfire, and the worst part, no one really knows what it is. The terminology is vague. Some call it lung rot, others siege throat, a few simply refer to it as the fever. Historians still argue whether actual outbreaks during sieges were more dangerous than enemy weapons. In your current state, you believe it. The guards start patrolling with cloth over their mouths. One woman is dragged out of the barracks and locked in a side tower after collapsing in the courtyard. You ask what happened. Someone says she coughed on the steward. That's enough, apparently. And yet, there's laughter too. Strange, misplaced, weary laughter. Someone tells a joke about the rat that outran the last fireball. Someone else dresses up in kitchen rags and reenacts the Lord's speech from day one. Only now he's using a soup ladle as a scepter. You laugh harder than you should. Maybe because you need to. Mealtime is now entirely silent. You eat your portion without complaint. Barley stew, if you can call it that. There's something crunchy in it. You don't ask. You've learned not to ask. But today's big event isn't food or fire or enemy movement. It's the bathing barrel. That's right. Someone set up a single wooden tub in the old servant quarters and filled it with water, warm. Somehow, people are lining up. You sign your name on a crude wooden board nailed beside it, 26th in line. You do the math and realize the water's going to be questionable by then, but you're still excited. The guy before you soaks for 10 minutes, humming a song about pickled eels. When it's finally your turn, you climb in fully clothed, because that's the only way you're going to get both yourself and your outfit clean. The water is tepid, with a strange film on top, but you don't care. It's the closest thing to joy you've felt in days. When you finish, you dry off with an old tunic and walk back to your spot feeling like royalty. Someone tells you your hair doesn't look like a haystack anymore. You thank them sincerely. Outside, a fight breaks out over a piece of boiled turnip. You sigh. This is the rhythm of siege life now: survival, squabbling, silent meals, sick rooms, small joys, and fewer options. Every day is the same, and every day is worse. But you're still here. And somewhere, deep below the keep, you hear something shift in the stones, a sound like a door opening, or a secret being remembered. You decide not to check it out. Not yet. There's something deeply unsettling about being under siege, yet still expected to follow orders like it's just another Tuesday. You're standing in a crooked hallway lined with faded tapestries, waiting your turn to receive duties from the steward, who, for the record, looks like he hasn't slept since the siege began. His robes are wrinkled, one of his sleeves is singed, and his voice sounds like a broom dragged across stone. When he finally looks at you, his eyes squint as if trying to categorize your usefulness. You're not a noble, not a soldier, not clergy, labor detail. He jots your name on a cracked tablet and waves you off. That's it, you're part of something called labor rotation. Later, you learn that everyone, yes, everyone, is now part of the castle's fragile ecosystem. Nobles help manage food logs, servants man the walls, even a baker is now helping reinforce the south tower with wet clay and sandbags. The lord of the castle, meanwhile, walks the walls once a day in a fur-lined cloak, flanked by two knights who look like they hate their lives. He doesn't speak to you. He doesn't speak to anyone, really, just observes, judging, maybe rehearsing his dramatic last stand speech. One guy tells you he overheard the Lord muttering in Latin to his sword. You think he's exaggerating, but also, you wouldn't be surprised. In theory, the chain of command is clear. The Lord is in charge, beneath him are the captains, then the garrison, then the stewards and scribes, and finally the assorted labor force, meaning you, and the rest of the siege extras. In practice, things are messy. The south wall garrison doesn't trust the north wall captain. The kitchen staff reports only to the cook, who answers to no one, apparently, not even God. And there's growing friction between the few remaining knights and the common footmen. They eat better. Someone hisses. They sleep with pillows. Pillows. You forgot those were real. You get your first real taste of discipline when a guard captain catches someone sneaking into the granary. The punishment? Public shaming and 2 days on night watch, which basically means standing on a freezing wall while sleep deprived, hoping not to get shot in the throat. That night, You watch from a tower window as the offender stumbles through their first shift, holding a torch like it might bite them. The sky is low and heavy with fog. You whisper a small thank you to the universe that it wasn't you. But it nearly was. Earlier that day, you tried to take a second helping of stew and were met with a glare sharp enough to peel bark off a tree. You backed off. Fast. Despite the tension, there are moments of strange camaraderie. While reinforcing the inner gate, a knight and a peasant end up laughing together over a shared memory of a drunken harvest festival. You learn they were both from the same village, years apart. Never knew it. Now they're stacking crates together to keep out battering rams. Another time, you're dragging firewood through the great hall when the steward yells at you for dripping mud on the tapestries. You're about to apologize, but an old woman cleaning the floors mutters, "Let him try scrubbing it himself," and everyone within earshot snorts. You find your role slowly shifting. At first, you're on firewood duty, then grain transport, then sentry watch, briefly, then assisting a scribe with parchment inventory, which is about as exciting as sorting sand. Finally, you end up in the defense crew for the East Wall, learning how to load rocks into a sling mechanism that looks like it was designed by a drunk carpenter. It's terrifying, and weirdly satisfying. One evening, during a dull patrol, a sergeant with one eye tells you how command used to mean something. He describes battles he fought where banners mattered, where oaths were kept. Now, he says, we're all just meat with different hats. You laugh. And he doesn't. You stop laughing. Historians still argue whether feudal command systems actually held up during long sieges. Some accounts describe orderly, hierarchical control. Others reveal petty rivalries and chaos beneath the surface. Judging by your current experience, it's a miracle anything gets done at all. One night, the Lord actually speaks. He addresses the inner court from atop the stone steps near the chapel. We will not surrender, he says. Not while breath remains. Not while the fire in our hearts still burns. It's a nice speech. Everyone claps. Then immediately goes back to arguing over who stole the last candle stub. The next morning, your shift starts with refilling the pitch buckets. You're handed a long ladle and warned, very sternly, not to spill. A man next to you whispers that once, someone dropped one on his own foot. He screamed like a banshee and then smelled like burnt pig for days. You walk slower. By now, you know the faces of those in charge. The captain of the wall watch, with the crooked nose and missing eyebrow. The steward's apprentice, who always looks like she's plotting something. The monk with wine breath who's quietly in charge of the medical tent. And you've also learned the golden rule of surviving under command. Stay useful. If they think you're helpful, they feed you. If they think you're lazy or sick or unreliable, you get temporary dismissal, which is a poetic way of saying, we won't come looking for you. So you volunteer. Often, you haul wood, you mix pitch, you help mend a broken wheel on the supply cart, you carry buckets. Always buckets. You've started dreaming about buckets. The structure of the castle might be crumbling, but its human machinery still lurches on, like a limping animal too stubborn to lie down. And you're now part of that machinery, a very tired, very sore cog. But a functioning one. You never imagined that one day your job description would include standing on a cold, narrow ledge while tossing boiling liquids at people trying to climb your home. Welcome to medieval castle defense, where things get sticky, literally. After your rough introduction to the siege engines and archers, you're drafted onto the wall defense team. Your first task, help manage the medieval version of dropping things on people. Specifically, boiling water, hot sand, or, if you're lucky, molten pitch. These liquids were meant to make climbing attackers think twice, or at least scream loudly. The problem? Pitch burns like hell, and it sticks. If you get any on yourself, congratulations, welcome to a slow, painful way to ruin your day. You're handed a heavy bucket filled with thick black liquid, smelling like burnt tar mixed with old pine. The bucket's weight pulls at your arms as you haul it near the battlements. You stand shoulder to shoulder with seasoned defenders, all of whom look like they've been cursed by every boiling liquid in the book. One veteran warns you not to spill any on your boots unless you want to lose them. Another grumbles about a poor fellow who accidentally poured boiling sand into his own helmet. The screaming lasted for hours. The battlements are crowded and slippery. Your footing is precarious, thanks to a mix of mud, spilled liquids, and discarded arrows. A sudden gust of wind threatens to tip you off balance more than once. You grip your bucket tight and try not to think about how easy it would be to fall several stories onto jagged rocks. Flaming oil, often portrayed in movies as a common medieval weapon, was actually rare. Historians still debate whether it was used widely or just reserved for desperate situations, partly because of how difficult it was to store and handle safely. What you're working with looks more like pitch or tar, heated to boiling point. The first wave of attackers approaches the wall. They're climbing ladders, their boots thudding against the wood and stone. You feel your heart hammering as you raise your bucket. A scream from below makes you hesitate for a split second, too long. A man's foot slips, and you pour boiling pitch right onto the ladder's base. It catches fire instantly. The attackers yell and scramble, trying to kick at the flames. You feel a brief rush of triumph before a volley of arrows rains down. You duck instinctively, but a stray arrow grazes your shoulder. It stings, but nothing serious. You pitch the rest of your boiling bucket down the wall's edge, watching as it spills over the invaders. The smell of burning flesh and melted pitch fills the air, horrifying and oddly intoxicating. The defenders behind you cheer. It's the kind of morale boost you didn't know you needed. For hours, this cycle repeats: arrows, boiling liquids, shouted orders, and the occasional rock hurled from above. Your arms ache. Your throat is dry. You can taste the smoke and sweat mingling in the air. Midway through, a sudden cry rings out. One of the attackers has managed to breach the wall near the gatehouse using a battering ram. Guards rush to defend it. You're torn between helping and staying on your post. The captain barks orders. Hold the walls. No one falls back. Your hands shake as you refill your bucket. You think back to the stories you've heard about those who fought sieges centuries ago, the brutal hand-to-hand fights, the desperate last stands. It's more intense than you imagined. More terrifying. More real. As night falls, the battle quiets. Fires burn low. You and your fellow defenders limp down from the walls, muscles screaming in protest. You realize that today, you've done more than just survive. You've become a part of the castle's stubborn heart, refusing to give up, refusing to let the walls fall. And tomorrow? You'll do it all again. The days bleed into each other now, and the sounds of siege become your new rhythm, the steady thump of trebuchets, the distant shouts of soldiers, the creak of wooden wheels dragging supplies, or battering rams, across the dirt below. You're no longer just surviving, you're learning the castle's secret language. Every crack in the wall, every whistle of an arrow, every gust of wind through a slit has meaning. You start recognizing the signs before the enemy does, the faint vibration just before a stone hurtles toward you, the subtle shift in troop movement signaling a new attack angle, even the way the guards' faces tighten in anticipation. At night, the great hall fills with whispered plans and anxious prayers. Men and women alike clutch their weapons or rosaries, hoping for a miracle or a reprieve. The once strong spirit of the castle has been chipped away like the walls outside. Inside, the living conditions grow worse. The constant dampness seeps into your bones. The latrine buckets overflow. Rats, emboldened by the siege's chaos, prowl freely, stealing scraps and sometimes nibbling on fingers. You tell yourself that you're not afraid of rats, but deep down, you're wrong. One evening, you find yourself in the chapel. The monk who had seemed so calm before is now pale and frail, his prayers more desperate. He shares stories of previous sieges, of people who lasted weeks, sometimes months, but at great cost. You must hold your body as well as your walls. He says quietly, disease is as much an enemy as the sword. His words settle in your mind. You realize that the invisible threats, sickness, despair, starvation, might be deadlier than the enemy armies. You try to keep spirits up among your fellow defenders. You tell stories you've heard, of heroes and fools, of miraculous escapes and narrow victories. You joke about the castle's quirks, the drafty corners, the stubborn bats, the suspiciously tasty rats. There's a rare moment when the Lord allows a game of dice in the courtyard. It's tense and messy, But laughter bubbles up despite everything. For a moment, you glimpse the life that existed before the siege, a life that felt normal, safe, even simple. But the respite is brief. A scout arrives, breathless and bloodied, bringing news that the enemy is reinforcing their siege lines, more trebuchets, more soldiers, and a siege tower taller than any before. The attack will intensify. You feel a cold knot of dread twist in your stomach. You know what that means. You steel yourself for what's to come, wrapping your cloak tighter against the chill, not just of the air, but of the unknown days ahead. Historians still argue whether defenders or attackers suffered more during sieges. Both endured hunger, disease, and terror, but only one side could claim victory. You vow silently to be on the right side of history. The siege drags on, and the castle becomes a strange world unto itself, part fortress, part prison, part survival camp. You've started to notice things you never would have before, the way the firelight dances against cracked stone, the rhythm of footsteps on wooden floors, the quiet moments when even the rats seem to pause. One morning, a messenger arrives with a battered letter from the outside world. It's addressed to the Lord but handed to you by a breathless courier. The letter is a rare glimmer of connection, news of shifting alliances, the slow approach of reinforcements, and a reminder that the war is bigger than these walls. You read it carefully, the ink smeared but legible. The Lord calls a meeting, and you're surprised when you're invited to attend as part of the labor detail's voice, an unusual gesture in these desperate times. Inside the great hall, candlelight flickers over faces worn by fatigue and worry. The Lord speaks of hope, of holding firm until help arrives. You feel the weight of responsibility settle heavier than any bucket you've carried. Outside, the enemy tightens their grip. Siege engines launch stones that crash against the walls, sending dust and debris flying. You've learned to time your breaths with the impacts, bracing yourself but growing numb to the shocks. The smell of smoke and sweat is constant, mingling with the ever-present dampness. You're covered in grime, your hands rough from endless labor. Yet, there's a strange beauty in the shared struggle, a silent bond forged in adversity. You watch as the cooks prepare what little food remains, rationing carefully. You trade stories with a fellow defender about the absurdity of medieval life, the odd foods, the bizarre customs, and the relentless challenges. At night, you find solace in the quiet moments, listening to the wind through the battlements, feeling the warmth of a dying fire, and watching stars through narrow slits. You wonder how many before you stood in this very spot, wondering if dawn would bring freedom or ruin. Historians still debate how much morale influenced the outcome of sieges. Some say hope is as powerful as walls, others believe it's just a fragile illusion. You choose to believe in hope. Because without it, survival would be impossible. The siege grinds on, and your body begins to betray you in new and creative ways. What started as aching muscles and bruised skin has escalated into a medley of ailments that no medieval doctor, let alone a priest mumbling Latin prayers, can cure. Your feet are the worst offenders, constantly damp from the ever-present moisture. Your boots have turned into soggy traps for your toes. You notice the first signs of what might be trench foot, skin peeling and an almost numb sensation that you try to ignore because, well, who has time for fancy foot care when there are stones to hurl and pitch to pour? The other defenders complain too, some louder than others. You overhear a grizzled soldier swearing that the castle's dampness will be the death of more men than enemy arrows ever could. You believe him. You find yourself sneaking moments in the chapel to rest, leaning against the cold stone walls while the monk tries to staunch wounds with herbs and a little luck. His remedies range from the mildly helpful, chamomile tea for calming nerves, to the outright bizarre. Like applying a paste made from crushed beetles to your swollen ankle, you don't ask questions. Sleep is a luxury that visits you briefly before vanishing. The cold seeps through your thin clothing, and the sounds of the castle, dripping water, distant groans, rats scurrying, keep you tethered to wakefulness. You dream about fresh air, sunshine, and the feel of soft earth under your feet. Dreams are cruel that way. The food supply has dwindled dangerously low. Rations are now so small that you can count the grains of barley in your daily stew. People barter fiercely for scraps, and the line between generosity and desperation blurs. You hear rumors of men risking secret sorties just to steal from enemy supply lines. Madness, but also bravery. One night, You overhear a whispered conversation about breaking the siege through negotiation. The Lord is said to be considering surrender, but no official word has been given. You don't know whether to hope or despair. Historians still argue whether surrender was more honorable than starving out, and whether terms were ever fair. You think you'd settle for just being allowed to sleep without fear. Your thoughts are interrupted by the sudden clatter of footsteps. A guard stumbles in, eyes wide with urgency. They're coming, he says. A new assault, tonight. You steel yourself. There's no turning back now. Night descends like a heavy curtain, swallowing the battered castle in shadows that feel both protective and suffocating. The tension is electric, you can almost taste it in the thick air. Everyone is awake, alert, and barely breathing, as if the very sound might betray your position. The enemy is gathering. You hear the muffled thuds of footsteps and the soft scrape of ladders being positioned against the walls. Your hands shake as you grip a spear, trying to steady your racing heart. Suddenly, the silence shatters. The clash begins. From your vantage point on the battlements, you watch figures surge upward, scaling the stone like ants. Arrows fly in deadly arcs, and you join in, picking off attackers whenever you can. A loud crack echoes as a ladder snaps beneath the weight of a struggling soldier. He falls, his scream cut short by the chaos. You lunge to throw a heavy rock, striking an enemy in the shoulder. The man stumbles and falls back into a pile of bodies. Below, the courtyard becomes a frenzy of steel and sweat. Men grapple, swords clashing, armor denting. You catch a glimpse of the Lord, sword drawn, fighting alongside his men, a reminder that this is no longer a noble's distant command but a fight for survival. Your lungs burn as you shout warnings and encouragement to your comrades. The smell of smoke and blood fills your nostrils. The battle seems endless. Waves of attackers surge forward, repelled only by sheer will and desperate defense. Your muscles scream, and your fingers numb, but you refuse to relent. At one point, a flaming arrow lands near your feet, setting a pile of straw ablaze. You kick it away quickly, heart pounding. Somehow, as dawn begins to break, the attackers retreat, leaving behind broken ladders, bodies, and silence heavy with exhaustion. You slump against the wall, sweat and grime mixing on your face. Your voice is hoarse, your body trembling, but you're alive. Historians still debate the effectiveness of such direct assaults on castles. Some say they were doomed to fail without overwhelming numbers or inside betrayal. Others note the terror they inflicted and the psychological toll. Tonight, you understand both. The siege is far from over, but for now, you have survived another day. Morning light filters weakly through the narrow arrow slits, revealing a castle that looks more like a war zone than a home. The damage is undeniable, craters pockmark the courtyard, wooden beams lie splintered, and the air still carries the acrid scent of smoke and sweat. You step carefully over broken stones and discarded weapons as you make your way to the infirmary, a cramped, chilly chamber where the sick and wounded are tended with whatever meager supplies remain. Inside, the scene is grim, faces gaunt with exhaustion and fever, bandages stained dark, the quiet moans of pain mixing with whispered prayers. The monk you've come to know is there, administering herbal poultices and murmuring words of comfort. His calm presence is a small beacon amid the chaos. You assist where you can, fetching water, holding a cloth to a bleeding wound, or simply offering a hand to steady a weak soldier. It's the hardest work yet. The wounded eyes you meet haunt you long after you leave. The worst cases are the sick, those taken by the fever spreading through the castle like wildfire. No one knows exactly what it is. Some call it the flux, others the pestilence. Whatever the name, it drains strength and steals breath. You watch as the infirmary fills, new arrivals brought in on stretchers or carried by friends too tired to protest. The smell is a mix of herbs, decay, and despair. Outside, the siege continues. You can hear the distant rumble of siege engines, the occasional shout, the persistent tension that never fully releases. Despite it all, the castle holds, walls scarred, spirits battered, but standing. You catch a glimpse of the Lord walking through the infirmary, his face drawn but resolute. He pauses by a dying soldier, placing a hand on his shoulder with unexpected tenderness. Historians still argue whether medieval medical care during sieges was more about healing or simply delaying the inevitable. Remedies ranged from practical to bizarre, and superstition mingled with science in equal measure. You find yourself silently praying, not just for survival, but for mercy. And for strength to carry on. The days grow colder, and with the chill comes a creeping fatigue that settles deep into your bones. The castle, once a symbol of strength and protection, now feels more like a cage tightening around you. Water supplies dwindle. The well, once a reliable source, is contaminated or dangerously low. Each drop you drink tastes faintly of earth and desperation. You start rationing even your own saliva in quiet moments of panic. Food is scarcer. The once hearty stews are now thin broths with a few scraps of root vegetables. You hear rumors of rats being boiled for soup, an unthinkable thought days before, now spoken of without disgust but as grim necessity. Your companions grow gaunt, their faces hollow, eyes sunken but still burning with fierce determination. You share what little warmth you have with them during the long, dark nights. There's talk among the defenders of surrender, of parley, of bargaining for mercy. The Lord remains silent on these rumors, but you see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. You steal moments of solitude on the ramparts, watching the enemy campfires flicker in the distance. They are many, organized, patient. One evening, as you sit shivering beneath a threadbare cloak, you recall tales of other sieges, places where starvation broke spirits long before the walls did, where the living envied the dead. You remember a scholar's debate you once read about, whether siege warfare was more a battle of endurance or attrition. Looking around at your hollow comrades, you understand it's both. The castle's stones seem to whisper ancient warnings, and you wonder how many who stood here before you met this fate. Despite everything, hope lingers like a fragile ember. Because surrender isn't just defeat, it's an unknown. And the fear of the unknown keeps you clutching the broken stones, the broken lives, and the shattered dreams of this fortress. You breathe deeply, steeling yourself for whatever comes next. A sudden commotion ripples through the castle like an electric shock. Whispers turn to shouts, shouts to frantic orders. The enemy has launched a surprise attack at the weakest section of the wall, the one you barely noticed before, masked by years of neglect. You're rushed to the battlements, heart pounding, muscles tense. The defenders scramble, pulling together makeshift barriers, readying weapons, bracing for impact. The attackers pour in like a dark tide, scaling the walls with renewed fury, wielding everything from rusty blades to makeshift clubs. The fight turns brutal and chaotic, shouts echo, steel clashes, and the air is thick with smoke and sweat. You fight alongside comrades, feeling the raw edge of fear and determination. Every breath is heavy, every movement counts. The Lord appears at your side, rallying the troops with fierce words and a sword raised high. It's a desperate moment, the castle's fate hanging by a thread. You catch yourself thinking back to the early days of the siege, to the dreams of glory and survival, to the grim reality now unfolding. The battle rages through the night, with neither side gaining ground. Eventually, exhaustion forces the attackers to pull back, leaving behind wounded and dead. In the eerie silence that follows, you feel a bittersweet relief. The walls still stand, so do you. Historians still debate how much internal morale and leadership influence the outcome of sieges. Your experience suggests it's everything. You slump against the cold stone, breathing hard, knowing the fight is far from over. But tonight, you survived. The siege is finally lifting, or so the rumors say. The enemy has retreated, their battered siege engines pulled away like broken toys, their campfires extinguished. You stand on the ramparts, the cold morning air filling your lungs with a crisp clarity you haven't felt in weeks. The walls, scarred and battered, still hold strong, a testament to the stubborn spirit of those inside. Around you, the castle stirs, wounded men groaning, the sick coughing, and a few tentative smiles breaking through the exhaustion. You take a moment to absorb the surreal calm after the relentless storm. The Lord, weary but alive, surveys his domain. His eyes meet yours, and for a fleeting second, there's a shared understanding, a bond forged in fire and stone. Historians still debate the exact reasons why some castles endured while others fell, weighing the roles of luck, leadership, resources, and sheer willpower. You realize it was a little of everything, and then some. as the sun rises higher, casting golden light over broken battlements and weary defenders, you feel a wave of gratitude and relief wash over you. The siege has ended, for now. But the scars, physical and mental, will remain. You know that this night, like so many before, will live on in memory, whispered in stories and songs long after the stones settle back into silence. You close your eyes, letting the soft breeze carry away the heavy weight of survival. And for the first time in what feels like forever, you allow yourself to hope. The castle settles into a quiet hush, like a tired giant finally resting after a long, fierce battle. You feel the weight of the day slowly melt away as the soft shadows stretch across the worn stones. The air is cool now, carrying whispers of the night and the faint scent of smoldering wood, a gentle reminder of all that has passed. You breathe deeply, the rhythm of your breath slow and steady, grounding you in this fragile moment of peace. Around you, the world feels softer, the edges less sharp, the distant noises muted to a calm murmur. The exhaustion in your limbs fades into a comforting heaviness, like a warm blanket wrapping around your shoulders. In this quiet, memories drift softly through your mind, the clash of swords, the crackling fires, the murmur of prayers and the laughter that somehow found its way through the darkness. You realize that survival isn't just about walls or weapons, it's about the small moments, the flickers of humanity that keep hope alive even when everything seems lost. Your eyes grow heavy as you sink deeper into this peaceful stillness. The troubles of the day blur and fade, replaced by the gentle hum of night, the soft rustle of leaves, and the distant call of a lone owl. Let the calm wash over you, carrying you gently toward rest. Tomorrow may bring new challenges, but for now, you are safe here, in the quiet heart of a castle that refused to fall, and in the quiet of your own steady breath. Good night, and sweet dreams.